This is the Unstarving Musician, and I am your host, Creator Robonzo. On this podcast, I speak with music pros to find out what they're doing in the areas of marketing, creativity, and business so that you and I can learn from them together so that we can do more of what we love, make music. Man, that was a live take, but it was take two, but I just got that space perfectly. You know, when I first did this podcast long ago, when I started it, I had an editor who came up with the idea to do that. Not brilliant, but he just loved it, and I've stuck with it ever since, for the most part. But I haven't been doing live intros like this. I've just been playing the same one over and over and over again. So yeah, you get to hear a new one on a day that my voice sounds a little unlike itself, and on a day that I have a bit of a speech impediment from a tongue injury. Turns out I bite my tongue in my sleep. I don't know what I'm dreaming or what, but I think I gotta talk to my dentist and get one of those stupid mouth guard things. And the voice is kind of trashed because I wasn't going to say it on the podcast, but I got the fucking COVID. And it's the first time. I'm triple vaxxed and pretty careful. But, you know, it's a multi-layer safety protocol, isn't it? It's no guarantee. And I had, I think, kind of been letting my guard down. I have pandemic fatigue like everyone, but, you know, a lot of people say it's like a bad cold, and I don't really want to say that, even though in some regards it was. But it was worse. I don't want it again, and I don't wish it upon you, and I don't suspect that I even had the really bad stuff that some of you may have had in the beginning or maybe somewhat recently. But anyway, I'm still recovering. Today is a good day, except for the voice and the tongue thing, but that too shall pass. Yeah, thank you for joining me for this. Really, I'm truly honored to be in your earbuds or on your speakers today, as always. The rest of my life is coming together here in Mexico, though. I'm set to start making music again. This illness was yet another setback, but the move is behind me, and universe willing, good health is ahead of me. Chris Cornell would have been 58 today, and Carlos Santana turns 75 today as I'm recording this. I like both of those guys. I really love Chris Cornell, and who doesn't love Carlos Santana? He's just an inspirational dude. I'm going to have to listen to both. I hope you'll listen to both, too. I think my friend Lynch Crichton is a Carlos Santana fan. It feels like I've heard her mention his name on more than one occasion. And anyway, I was looking for a way to segue into the topic of music marketing method, which is a creation of my friend Lynch Crichton. It's a program she put together to help musicians find their fan base, grow their audience, and set foundations for a music business that can actually make money. I'm in the program, and as of recently, so is my good friend Fiddle Joe Patterson, and he's kind of got it all going on. Maybe you should be in the program too, but only you can know the answer. But you can learn more about music marketing method at unstarvingmusician.com/music marketing. I will have that link in the show notes for you. But once again, unstarvingmusician.com/music marketing. In this episode, I revisit a conversation I had way back in May of 2017, and it's part of a newish concept I'm calling Rewind, where I deep dive and further examine conversations like the ones I'm going to talk about in this episode and play clips from. The first Rewind episode I did was the previous episode, the last episode I did, which was featuring a conversation with Mike Dawson. I hope you'll check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes, or you can just go to unstarvingmusician.com and find it there. So I met Chris, I think months before we had this conversation. I had an opportunity to play on a beautiful stage with him in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, with him and several other people that I already knew at the time. And I was really impressed with his playing, and I must have heard something about his music journey because I became interested in talking to him for the podcast. He had a journey out to Nashville that had him working with the likes of Travis Tritt, the Dixie Chicks, and Stan Lynch of Tom Petty's Heartbreakers, among many, many others. And so in this conversation, we're going to talk about that and more, starting with how he got started in Nashville, taking a leap of faith and putting in the work. He really played a long game, which I can't stress enough, and continues to this day. In the late 90s, he was invited to visit and work with a friend who was a pro songwriter. That guy's a mutual acquaintance of ours, Jon Christopher Davis, also goes by JCD. And based on recording work that JCD heard that Chris had done, he invited him out to do some songwriting demos with him, meet some people, because he thought Chris was that good at what he did as a recording engineer. And he knew as a musician, too, that he was pretty darn good at that as well. So Chris did a traveling commute thing for a year or two from Dallas-Fort Worth to Nashville. He immediately started invoicing Warner Chappell, the label that I believe JCD was part of at the time. But it was a way for him to slowly get into the business, which he talks about, and slowly start getting referrals from other studios and musicians, and best of all, just start getting paid and getting the encouragement and feedback that he needed to move forward and eventually move out to Nashville. Here's what Chris had to say about getting started and getting paid in Nashville.
I got invited to come to Nashville just to come visit and hang and do some preliminary work a couple of years before I moved there. I moved there in about 2000. And so this was probably 97, 98, somewhere around there. A friend of mine who had moved there a couple of years prior was living there. And I had done some recording here in Dallas-Fort Worth, just with some original bands, local bands, stuff that I'd done, stuff that I wasn't a part of. And I just sent it to my friend who was already there, who was a professional songwriter, and just thought I'd send it to him, you never know kind of thing, just to get his opinion. And he calls me back after he got the CDs in the mail and was just like, man, this is great. Who recorded this? Where'd you do it? Whatever. And after he found out that I was the main person that recorded it, he invited me to come out and hang and stay with him and do some songwriting demos for him, and then just meet all the people that he knew and worked with, and kind of just to start, building your circles and kind of getting your feet wet in the town. And I did that for about a year or two, just going there, working for a week or so, coming back, being here in Texas for a month or two, then, rinse and repeat. And eventually, after doing that for a year or so, he finally just said, man, he goes, why don't you just move here? It's like, you're already working with me. You can start working with other people once you're here. And he goes, I think it's time. And so I just thought about it and, made sure it was kind of a feasible thing and made the move, made the leap. As far as getting paid, pretty much when he invited me to come up and we started doing stuff, I immediately was able to invoice his publisher, which I believe was Warner Chappell at the time. Mm-hmm. And so, we would sit there and spend a couple days and record a song and, would turn it in, and I would invoice the company for, whatever. And, of course, with that thing, it's like you send it off and it goes to either New York or LA into their offices where they do all the bookkeeping and stuff, and it may take 6 months before you get it. So nobody was getting rich, that's for sure. It was more about just getting into the business at the time, building up clientele and building up, work. So, but I was fortunate enough that just through this one guy, his name was Jon Davis, that I was able to get there and, immediately start working with one person. And then that eventually, his co-writers would hear stuff and people, and then him playing stuff around town, they would hear stuff and be like, oh, wow, this sounds pretty good. Where'd you record this? Or who'd you record this with? And, then it's like, well, actually it's my friend, blah, blah, blah. And then that would turn into work. Then I would get a call from one of his co-writers and say, "Hey, do you think you could come to this studio or come to my house, and record this song for me?" And of course, you're like, "Sure,
Yeah.
for the mayor,
Yeah.
and just that's how I built the recording world. And it's pretty much how everybody does it. You work with one person, and hopefully other people hear it, and then they call you, and you just keep getting your circles larger and larger.
In this next clip, I had started asking Chris about the landscape of music in Nashville, which he described as very competitive. And you'll hear him talk about overcoming the objections just through the quality of his work and the work he did with his friend JCD and others with a home studio set up in a place where recording at a high level, such as Chris was doing, was really just unheard of in a home studio. And it really speaks to the quality of workmanship that Chris was putting out, and that actually times were starting to change as well.
Yeah, it is a very, of course, nowadays it's a very, very competitive world.
Sure.
The one thing back then, this is 2000, early 2000s, recording at home or recording with your own gear, which is a lot of what I was doing. I had, all the gear and to, record a full band or a whole record. So that kind of set me apart from some people. But there was not total confidence in you could do records at home or do records in a lot of stuff I had was like converted garages where when you were in it, it felt and looked like a commercial studio, or at least, fairly decent.
Mm-hmm.
But there was still that whole, oh, you're not recording at, blah, blah, blah studio, Ocean Way or all these other places, and so the suits or powers that be, there was definitely some skepticism back then about, can you really do stuff, out of a commercial brick and mortar studio that's going to sound good and, compete and all this stuff. You just had to do it and turn it in, and then they'd go, "Oh, well, yeah, that sounds cool. Great." And it was actually cheaper. So,
Next, Chris and I get into the weeds a little bit on this makeshift studio of his, this home studio, and also networking. He discusses the setup and talks a little about the methods he was using, and these are methods that would later become a common approach to recording. And how he started tagging along with his friend JCD for sessions, meeting people, contributing little by little in the studio, both at the console and as a musician. And then before he knew it, people started asking for him. He said it was all, kind of flying by the seat of his pants, but I suspect it was probably intuitive for Chris. But I think this is a really great section because it does speak to following intuition, flying by the seat of your pants once in a while, and letting things happen. And, of course, the power of meeting people and networking, developing relationships.
Some of the first stuff I did, I was recording. Actually, I set up before I lived there, I set up a makeshift little studio at his place where we just kind of took over 2 bedrooms, and we had one bedroom was a control room. And then the other bedroom, we would, if we were doing a guitar, we'd put the guitar amp in there and we'd be in the other room. Or if we did drums, and luckily the type stuff he was doing and the time frame, he didn't mind doing stuff, what I call like brick by brick, where you're, you get a click track and you may do the drums, and then you may, do the guitar and bass, and you're kind of doing things, one at a time.
Right.
Kind of like Alanis Morissette and Glenn Ballard, that first record she did, it was very much just the two of them, kind of thing, one thing at a time. And, when you're doing records like that, it's a lot easier to do things at a home studio or a makeshift place, because you're not dealing with 5 or 6, band members all at once, and so, yeah, and he preferred actually working that way because he liked to have the control and stuff. And so, yeah, we did a lot of recordings like that in the beginning. And then we we'd get in the car and go around town, and he may have a session booked at a commercial studio, and I'd go and hang out or play or do something, and just kind of started, getting into that world as well, as an engineer and as a player, of course, you start off just being the guy in the back of the room, just watching.
Yeah.
And then, then you kind of get in a little bit as far as playing a little part here and there or helping the engineer or whatever. So just totally organic, just, grew it. And there was actually other people, the first couple people I worked with, outside of his thing was, same thing. They had a home studio and was asking me to come over and engineer and play. And then that turned into doing, some sessions for them, around town, with other people. So, just innocent, seat of the pants, just, networking and just building your scene.
In this next bit of conversation, Chris and I talk about things that started happening as a result of his workmanship and willingness to play the long game. And that excitement involved playing on both The Tonight Show with Jay Leno and being featured on a song that hit it big with an HBO series called True Blood. The Tonight Show thing with Jay Leno, as well as the work on the True Blood theme song Bad Things, came about because of a friend by the name of Jace Everett, who was the writer of Bad Things. So Chris talks about how these events played out to the best of his memory, a chronological memory, and playing on the album that featured Bad Things, calling himself like the only non-A-list player, I believe is what he calls it, on the session. But because he'd played together quite a bit with Jace, was given an opportunity to play on there. And he talks about a radio promo tour they did, where we start getting into the changes in the business and how rapidly they were even happening at this time. The invitation to play at The Tonight Show, HBO ultimately sticking with True Blood to be the theme song, which had initially been picked up during the development phase of True Blood, and it wasn't even supposed to end up being the theme song. But Chris, once again, he refers to luck and the fluke of many of these things and the whole innocence of it, and how he and others got picked up along with the luck and taken along for the ride. Check this out.
I'm trying to go in chronological order if I can. I probably won't, but
it's okay.
The Tonight Show happened because a very good friend of mine, Jace Everett, who is still in Nashville, we actually, he's from Texas as well, like I am. I moved up, and then he moved up a little while later. He wound up getting a record deal in Nashville, made a country record on Sony, and started doing the artist thing. And I played with him, while I was there in town. And he had a song called Bad Things. And this was still when it was just a song on his record, on his album. Mm. And I was lucky enough to have played on the album when he was cutting it. I was probably the only, I'd say, non-A-list player, Nashville player on the session. And God knows why, other than just, Jace was cool enough and the producer was cool enough to give me a shot, because we'd been playing together live so long. So I played some acoustic and played some electric, and so I played on the record, and he got asked to be on The Tonight Show, even though that song didn't really do that well at country radio because it was not very country sounding. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds crazy now because people are like, well, nothing sounds like country, but back then, this is like 05, 06.
Sure.
Songs on country radio still were fairly country sounding. There was still a yardstick that people were using as far as, is this song, right for country radio kind of thing. So he had this song and we recorded, and it was just a cool song. And, so we went to country radio. We did all the, where you go to the station and you play for the program director or the DJ, and most of the time they turn you down, but sometimes, they're like, oh, cool. Then they add your song, and, you're there with the person from the label and the artist and you go around and you're basically just trying to, build the song up, get it played from coast to coast. Which again, that was something you could do back then. It's kind of different the way they do it now. But so, we went all over the country, and it got played a little bit, made a video for it. And somehow they got the song to whoever was booking the Tonight Show at the time, as far as booking the live talent. And they reached out to him and said, hey, we love this, come be on the show. And so we went and did it. And, for a whole day, we thought we were the biggest thing since sliced bread.
I didn't know the two gigs were connected. That's so fascinating.
Yeah. So the song had been recorded. It was released to country radio. We did the Tonight Show. And then actually there was a show called True Blood that was coming up on HBO. It was still, when it was still in its, they were still, filming and editing and getting the show off the ground. The show hadn't been aired yet. And the music supervisor of the show somehow heard the song Bad Things and liked it and was using it temporarily as the theme song for the show, thinking that they were going to find something later. By the time the show aired, they thought they would get someone to actually write and record something brand new specifically for the show. That this was just kind of like a placeholder, something to have some music, versus not having music at all.
Yeah.
Well, but they after several months of using the song and, behind the scenes stuff and editing, they got so used to it that when it came time for the show to air for the first time, they were like, we really now can't see or hear anything but this song being the theme song. So that's when they reached out to him again and or maybe for the first time and said, we want to use this song. And he was like, sure. So that's when the song got a whole new life. It got reborn again as far as being used for that. And the fact that I'd played on the record, this year or two prior to that, when it was just, for his country record, and they used, all the original tracks. I think they may have remixed it, but they didn't replace any tracks for the TV version. So I was lucky enough that I played guitar on it.
That's cool.
And so so that was great. So it was just kind of lucky beats smart kind of thing, or lucky beats good sometimes. And so that And so that song actually, I think it was, the show went on for 7 seasons, 6 or 7 seasons, and it was the theme song. So for 7 years, every time that show aired, you heard me playing guitar.
That's pretty amazing. I have some friends that are going to be very impressed when I tell them about it.
Well, and also I have to totally give credit to my friend, Eric Borash, Ebo. He played guitar in it as well. He did the main riff you hear is actually Eric, and then you hear me do the solo in the middle, and then I think I'm also doing some color stuff. It's been so long, I'm trying to remember. I played acoustic, and then I did some color rhythm stuff. So
I'll have to go listen to it again. I've never listened to the entire track.
Yeah, so when you hear that song, it's there's definitely, you can spread the credit around, but that just, again, it was another just kind of lucky fluke, innocent, just you go do something and hope for the best. And, for whatever reason, something gets picked up and used or it takes on another life and you kind of just get picked up with it. And so, Jace had a lot of success and a lot of opportunities happen, of course, after that, because, millions of people every week were, hearing the song and wanting him to do other stuff. And of course, then, this was a year or two after country radio kind of passed on the song. So then it was kind of a last laugh kind of thing,
Yeah, it's definitely kind of a niche. It's kind of a niche sound. I could see, I guess,
it
why that might have happened.
Rockabilly.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it was a dark minor key song, rockabilly, So yeah, it was. I mean, I don't blame country radio for not knowing what to do. And the thing is, it was kind of a little bit ahead of its time in the sense that this is before people were really pushing the envelopes of country radio, where now, I mean, there's stuff that just sounds like, rock or rap or pop. I mean, just doesn't sound like country at all. And, country radio takes a chance and plays it but back then, yeah, it was very hard. So, it was just a timing thing, but we were just very happy and lucky that the song, was discovered again and had a second life. It definitely propelled a lot of us further down the road as far as our careers.
Up next, Chris and I get into the indie artistry aspect of everything. The music business was changing every couple of years, as it still does today. The internet changed everything from when Chris had first started this story, this journey of his, and the focus had moved away from selling records to selling live shows, touring, concerts, and fan-based development, much like we have today. He sees records today, and especially at the time we spoke, as like a business cards for your live show. I would say that for today, that still applies, but it's kind of a business card for everything you do. This whole change definitely helped live shows, he says. And then, of course, as we all know, the pandemic has happened, which has changed even that. But at the time, Chris was living all this out with his then peers. Mailbox money, as we call it, diminished. Royalties really diminished, but the live music industry flourished. Some artists became less visible in a way, but they were actually touring more as the industry changed. And he talks a bit about that. It does make me wonder how those artists felt about that. I imagine some of them felt great, among the ones who were even willing to go out and tour and sort of reinvent themselves. And it's probably very analogous with the way artists reacted, how they felt after the pandemic. And, performing live just wasn't a thing for a long time and is still barely a thing today as I record this, as the pandemic rages on and the industry adapts. But this is a real lesson in the ever-changing music business and just everything, the world, and how it is quite possible to reinvent ourselves, just kind of keep our eyes open to what's happening and figuring out where we fit.
I think it's definitely, like you said, it's changed. I mean, the town and the industry. I mean, I remember, first being there in 2000. It was a totally different scene. And then by 2005, it was different. By, 2010. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, every couple of years it was changing. And so God knows now, the town, the industry in general, I mean, even in rock, I mean, just everything with the internet, with, the fact that really people just don't buy music very much anymore. It has really changed the industry and it's changed how we make a living. There are pluses and minuses. The pluses are that people really don't look to sell tons of records. And I think that, we've all realized now that nobody sells a lot of records anymore, or hardly, so we kind of, all of us are kind of at that indie level when it comes to that, Right. But what it's done is it's really forced people to getting their live show and their touring and their concert scene happening, and their fan base, because that's really where you're going to make your money as an artist, is touring and playing gigs and merchandise, T-shirts and I think you will sell some stuff as far as hard CDs at shows, but there's just, there's hardly any record stores anymore where there's physical product, to go to. And then, a place like iTunes, what's hard is that you have so many people that just will go and just buy one song.
Right. I did that this week.
Yeah. It's just, it's when you can do it, you will, kind of thing. Like if somebody offers you ice cream 3 times a day, to eat, you're probably going to do it, at least for a while, whether it's good for you or not, or good for everybody else around you. So, the fact that this technology and things have been made available, it's just, unfortunately, that's just the way, things work now. And so tons of people will just go to iTunes, and if they are buying music and, they go and buy a song or two, and it's very hard to make a living or to break even or, make your ends meet, when people are just cherry picking a song or two off you. Because when iTunes is only selling it for $1 or $1.29, and then you only get, what is it, about 30 cents of that, I think, goes to the artist. And when I say artist, I mean their camp. That means if you're a band, you are splitting that quarter 4 or 5 different ways. You're splitting it with your management, your manager. You're splitting it with the, so it's just, so you can see how it's very hard to make a living when people are just going, oh, I'll take that song from this guy. Then I'm going to come over here. I'm going to take that song from that guy or that girl. So you can't rely on, when I think, like what I've said and other people said, really records these days are more like living, breathing calling cards, business cards or commercials for your live show. Yeah, and the nice thing is that it really, I think, has it has forced people, or at least got people more, I think, in recent times out to seeing shows again. Because I think if you want to hear music these days, I think a lot more people are, experiencing it live and seeing their favorite bands, or seeing bands like, the indie bands and stuff that you may not hear them. Well, you're probably not going to hear them on mainstream radio, and of course with YouTube, again, the whole world's changed, and you can, on those avenues, you can listen to whatever you want, whenever you want. But yeah, so I think it has kind of, and it's pushed older artists to get out again and play, because, they're not making the royalties they used to make, where you can just sit home and, rake in the mailbox money. I think that the plus is that it has made the live music industry grow and flourish and expand. And it's definitely fed that whole part of the industry. Whereas maybe there was times in the past where it wasn't as big as it is now. Yeah. Well, like, Travis Tritt, one of the people you mentioned, that I've worked with, a lot of people, just because you don't hear him on the radio as much as you did, back in the day. And, he has never lived in Nashville, even though he's a Nashville artist. He's from Georgia, from the Atlanta area, and lives around that area to this day. So he's kind of off the radar when it comes to a lot of country things, a lot of Nashville things. But yet I was with them the last 4 years before I moved back to Texas. And every year we toured about as much, if not more, than probably anybody else I've worked with in my time in Nashville. We would work up until the teens of December, like December 18th or somewhere around there. And then by January 6th, January 10th, we were going back out. And that was unheard of. Usually most of the people that I worked with or played with on the road, you'd work up until about Thanksgiving, and then it would, it was already starting to trail off by then. But, usually Thanksgiving was about the cutoff point where people were like, okay, we're done for the year. Holidays are coming up. We're going to spend time with our families.
Yeah.
So, you guys, the band, just hang out, do what you can to survive. And you would be off from about Thanksgiving until the end of March. So, you had several months where you just had to figure out what you were going to do in town, and that was very common. But nowadays, and of course, guys like Travis, and maybe partly because of the industry the way it is. I mean, they have to make a living too,
sure.
And so that's forced them to go out and tour more, which again puts money in the pockets of, the musicians that are touring, and, the sound guys and lighting guys and tour bus drivers and all that. So, I mean, it's definitely, a rising tide floats all boats, I guess you'd say.
In this final segment, I ask Chris about how he markets his recording business and himself. And he just goes straight to networking and reputation being everything. He says things like, being nice, fun, dependable, having a work ethic, being prepared. And that is his marketing. He's not doing much of the traditional things. You'll hear him mention he's on Facebook. The other thing he doesn't say, something really important that he possesses, is humility. Again, he doesn't say it, but it's there. You've possibly already picked up on it, and if not, you'll pick up on it here.
I'll say this because this is something that I always get asked about, and it pertains to everything you do, in the music business. And I think if, it's about networking, and reputation is everything. And I think whether you are playing a gig, or whether you're trying to get more recording work, or if you're a sound guy, I don't care what it is. I think if you're nice, if you're fun, pleasant to be around, if you're dependable, if you strive to do a good job, if you show up prepared, and just have, a basic pride in your work, that is the biggest commercial and promotion you can do for yourself, because it doesn't take long for word to get around, no matter what you're trying to do, no matter if you're trying to, start a studio in your house and you're trying to get clients, or you've moved to a new town and you're trying to get gigs and trying to work with people. Just people want to work with people that they like, and they want to work with people that are good and people that are dependable. And the more you can get that out there, that's what you're all about, the better. I've seen it happen. If you don't have those three things, I've seen people get passed up for gigs, and I've passed up people hiring. And I'm sure there was times where I didn't take care of that side of things, and or let some of that stuff slip. And I'm sure I've been passed up for stuff because of some of those things. So it's really important. I couldn't stress it enough to young players and even old players, just the importance of the hang, and just the pride in your work, and just, being dependable. When people, whether it's, whether you're doing it for fun, or whether, it's a business and someone's hired you for work, for hire, for money, that nobody wants it to be hard. They want it to be fun. They want it to be easy. They want it to be, a cool experience. And so the more you can get out of the way and contribute to whatever it is being a positive experience, the better it's going to be. And the more that person next time is going to be like, you know what, call Chris, or whoever, whoever it may be, because, they just, in their mind, you're thinking, man, last time it was great. So I want that again, whether it was the gig or, whatever you're doing.
That is a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this rewind, this look back on my conversation with Chris Raspante. You can hear the full conversation at unstarvingmusician.com, of course. It's episode 2. You can just look for that, or look for Chris Raspante. I'll put a link in the show notes, as I'm wont to do. And if you like the podcast, please follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. It really helps with discovery so other musicians and fans can find us, and it supports the podcast. This episode was powered by Bandzoogle, the platform for musicians and bands to build their website and manage direct-to-fan marketing and sales. Bandzoogle features powerful design options, a commission-free store to sell music, merch, and tickets, detailed fan data, integrations with social networks, and more. Plans start at just $8.29 a month, which includes a free custom domain name. Try it at bandzoogle.com and use the promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code ROBONZO. If you love what I do, if you find value in what I do here on the podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor or the show notes for this episode to learn about options for offering your support. The Unstarving Musician accepts direct financial support, and we very much appreciate it, but there are several other ways to support the podcast and help keep it going. Again, you can learn more about those options for supporting the Unstarving Musician podcast at unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor. Did you know you can help other independent musicians find the Unstarving Musician by following or subscribing on your audio platform of choice? Well, now you do, and it really does help. And if you have feedback, please go to unstarvingmusician.com to get all my contact info. You can text me, call me, email me, leave a voice message right there on that page. Just go down to the bottom of the page and you'll find everything you need to know. I really would love to hear any of your comments, suggestions, questions, whatever you've got. And you can find links to just about everything talked about in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. All right, I'm peacing out. Thank you for listening and sharing with your musician friends and fellow indie music bands. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.